The defense industry showcases its next-generation interceptors. Footage from the Surface Navy Association's 2026 symposium displays the SM-2 Block 3C CU missile. The media amplifies the threat of kinetic strikes. This is a calculated misdirection. The mathematical certainty of a national solvency crisis, as detailed in reports like Coming Reckoning for Uncle Sam, renders this model of warfare obsolete. The kinetic cost is prohibitive. The primary vector for systemic risk is not a hypersonic launch. It is strategic silence. CSIS assessments confirm state-level investment in unmanned underwater vehicles designed for one purpose: to sever the undersea fiber optic cables that function as the world's circulatory system. This is not about explosive destruction. It is about initiating a global liquidity crisis with a pair of deep-sea shears. The second vector is orbital, non-kinetic satellite blinding. Not warhead detonations, which are traceable and escalatory, but targeted energy bursts to temporarily overload an adversary's sensors. The objective is not destruction. It is to create a systemic liability, the blind Leviathan, a superpower deaf and dumb, its command and control network severed from its assets. While the Leviathan is blind, the real attack begins. Not with armies, but with asymmetric strikes against undefended liabilities, precisely like the cyber attack that targeted Poland's energy grid. The adversary's blueprint is to bypass the expensive military and attack the solvency of the state itself, triggering a feedback loop where the defender bankrupts itself, reacting to the wrong threat. All kinetic conflict is fundamentally an economic transaction. The motive for war is no longer ideology, but solvency. A state's capacity to wage a symmetric, force-on-force war is a direct function of its balance sheet. When that balance sheet is saturated with liability, its strategic options collapse. This is the solvency crisis. As national debt escalates, a condition analysts refer to as a coming reckoning for Uncle Sam, the state loses its capacity for expensive, conventional responses. The kinetic cost of deploying carrier groups and next-generation interceptors becomes prohibitive. This weakness is not a secret. It is a signal broadcast to adversaries. Weakness forces a pivot to asymmetry. Consider the Russian Federation. CSIS analysis confirms a core motive for its strategic shift was an internal solvency crisis. Facing crippling domestic liabilities and the unsustainable cost of an unpopular kinetic war, the calculus changed. It is mathematically cheaper to trigger a systemic failure in an adversary than to defeat its military. The objective is to bypass the expensive shield and strike the vulnerable, undefended economic foundation. This is not a future threat. This is a documented protocol. The December 2025 cyber attack targeting Poland's energy grid was a live-fire demonstration of this doctrine, a low-cost, high-impact vector against a critical systemic liability. This creates the perfect feedback loop. The exorbitant cost of preparing for a symmetric war, exemplified by assets like the SM-2 Block 3C CU, accelerates the very solvency crisis that makes a nation vulnerable to asymmetric attack. The motive is clear. An adversary forces you to bankrupt yourself preparing for the wrong war, and then executes a low-cost offensive against the financial weakness you created. The core of asymmetric escalation is a mathematical certainty. A new report from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, quantifies the kill chain. The kinetic cost to neutralize a $5 million main battle tank is now as low as $500, delivered by a first-person view drone. This is not a balanced equation. It is an economic execution. This inversion of lethality economics scales across all domains. The U.S. Navy showcases assets like the SM-2 Block 3C interceptor, a multi-million-dollar defensive weapon. Its purpose is to destroy incoming threats that can be launched for a fraction of the cost. The defender's solvency is bled dry with every successful interception. The defender must be right 100% of the time. The attacker only needs one vector to succeed. This is the blueprint for what military strategists at CSIS call the democratization of violence. The state's monopoly on high-impact kinetic force has been broken by commercial technology. It no longer requires a nation's industrial base to threaten critical infrastructure. It requires a credit card and an internet connection. This decentralizes the threat vector, making attribution impossible and preemption a financial fantasy. The result is a systemic liability. The defender is forced to harden every potential target, an impossible economic task, or bankrupt itself on expensive launch-on-warning defense systems. Every dollar spent preparing for a symmetric state-on-state war is a dollar that cannot defend against the cheap asymmetric attack that is already underway. This is not a military failure, it is a solvency crisis, engineered by the weaponization of economics. The map of the next war is not where legacy media directs your attention. It is found in the operational gray zones, regions designated by state-level travel warnings and expiring protected statuses. These are not the source of conflict. They are the proxy laboratories. According to CSIS analysis, these zones of managed instability are leveraged as staging grounds to beta test asymmetric attack vectors before deployment against primary state targets. The accelerant for this strategy is a simple mathematical certainty: a looming solvency crisis. While the Pentagon showcases next-generation interceptors like the SM-2 Block 3C, a multi-million-dollar symmetric defense asset, adversaries read headlines about America's coming debt reckoning. This disparity creates a strategic incentive. Why engage in high-cost kinetic warfare against a carrier group when you can achieve systemic paralysis for a fraction of the cost? This is not theory. The blueprint has been executed. The December 2025 cyber attack on Poland's energy grid was a graduation exercise from these proxy laboratories. It was a low kinetic cost, high-impact strike against a systemic liability, bypassing Poland's conventional military entirely. RUSI reports confirm this is the new protocol. Refine the weapon in a peripheral zone, then deploy it against a core network. The U.S. travel warning for Somalia is not a humanitarian bulletin. It is an intelligence indicator of a live testing environment. The feedback loop is now active. As a state's financial liabilities grow, its capacity for symmetric response diminishes. This forces it to overinvest in expensive hardware like the SM-2, while adversaries launch asymmetric attacks that further degrade the economy, requiring more debt. It is a state of self-bankrupting launch-on warning, preparing for the wrong war. The prediction is therefore clear. The next 12 months will see an increase in these glitches: power outages, supply chain disruptions, social media. Fueled flashpoints, in Western nations dismissed as accidents, but originating from protocols perfected in the gray zones. The launch-on warning doctrine is not a strategy of choice. It is a protocol of necessity. In a symmetric nuclear exchange, the side that strikes first has the capacity to eliminate its opponent's ability to retaliate. According to RUSI analysis, launch-on warning is the automated countermeasure. Once early warning radar and satellites confirm inbound hostile missiles, a retaliatory launch is initiated before those missiles can impact and destroy one's own arsenal. It is a mathematical function designed to guarantee mutual destruction. This protocol contains a systemic vulnerability. The fog of digital war is a condition where the warning system itself becomes the primary battle space. Adversaries understand this. The 2025 cyber attack on Poland's energy grid, confirmed by its prime minister, was not just an attack on infrastructure. It was a blueprint. It demonstrated the capacity to cripple a nation's core systems with low-cost, non-kinetic tools. Now, place a commander in a bunker. The screens are blind. The protocol is screaming that a failure to launch means certain annihilation of retaliatory capability. Is it a server malfunction, or is it a decapitation strike that has already neutralized the nation's eyes and ears? CSIS reports confirm this is the end game of asymmetric escalation. Force your opponent into an impossible choice, where inaction carries the same perceived risk as initiating a full-scale launch. As a state's solvency crisis deepens, as highlighted by reports on America's coming debt reckoning, its ability to afford redundant, hardened systems diminishes. The reliance on automated hair-trigger protocols like launch-on warning becomes an economic necessity. An adversary doesn't need to spend trillions matching a carrier group or missile platforms like the SM-2 Block 3C. They only need to bankrupt the defender's decision cycle. The fear of being disarmed forces the launch, turning the defender's own protocol into the primary vector of systemic risk. The mathematical certainty of a national solvency crisis, as documented by outlets like the Times of Israel, dictates the operational playbook of our adversaries. While the Pentagon showcases expensive kinetic interceptors like the SM-2 Block the 3C, the true vector of attack is asymmetric. The primary liability is not the carrier group, it is the power grid. CSIS reports confirm the blueprint exists, a low-cost, high-impact cyber attack designed for plausible deniability, mirroring the methodology targeting Poland's energy infrastructure. The objective is not military attrition, it is systemic bankruptcy. This is the launch-on warning protocol for economic warfare. Therefore, the calibration shot is imminent. Within the next 12 months, a key U.S. liquefied natural gas, LNG, export terminal will experience a catastrophic multi-day shutdown. The event will be publicly attributed to cascading equipment failure. It will not be an act of war. It will be an act of accounting, a field test of America's capacity to absorb an economic shock without a clear enemy to target.